Drink plenty of water. That's what I would say every day for the rest of time. Political campaign, charity funds. If we need a slogan, the default can be drink water. In fact, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't do this right now. Hopefully you're all staying hydrated and healthy out there. Wanted to give a quick shout out. Thankfully my mom helped me out. I made last week I said he for Chris Brown, the co-writer with my mom's book about self-worth. He is a she. Thank you for adding that. And they both did a great job. Once again, those are on sale at like Barnes & Noble, and I know my mom, that was like one of her big bucket lists in life, was being able to sell a book on shelves like that. A book with a message that she wants to help people out, you know. And she's kind of educated me more about, even in the practice of therapy, where you're trying to help heal people, there are people involved that unfortunately prioritize a profit or even just learning tactics to manipulate others. So it's great that she has such a heartfelt priority to get this out there and hopefully help other people discover good feelings of self-worth. I remember when I was a little kid, in first, second grade, I would hang out with Ben Bennington a lot, and family friends. Their family and our family were pretty good friends just overall. And that was when I first played Super Smash Bros. Melee. I'll never forget, that was the first time I played a GameCube, was at their house right after Melee came out. And the first thing I did when I was handed a GameCube controller was go like, whoa, and the trigger buttons were really cool. And I also remember that night they requested me to stop playing Ganondorf. I specifically remember playing on Brinstar Depths. We were playing Free For All. And I just remember some of the family members were not happy with me, I guess, doing super well with Ganondorf. And looking back, Ganon, he definitely packs a punch. Really fun character for sure. And I remember one of the times hanging out with him, 2001, 2002, I was in first and second grade, for context. And I think the 90s to the 2010s was one of the, I think, honestly, the biggest double decade in human history when it comes to evolving technology. They talk about how millennials went through VHS tapes to DVDs to Blu-rays to digital streaming rapidly, and it's true. I was able to have fond memories of Blockbuster as a kid, but also I was also able to grow up with watching YouTube videos on demand. This account has been around since 2007. It's a really interesting, it's almost like a catch-22 scenario. The catch-22, but I even want to call it a catch-22. I enjoyed being able to experience VHS tapes and CRTs, right? So it's more about, honestly, it really is this miasma. It's this oasis era, really, it's a blend of nostalgia and rapidly growing technology. I think that's why vaporwave music has become so popular. A big factor in vaporwave and synthwave, not just artistically is it great in general. Electronic Gems is one of the best music stations on YouTube. But I think there's a sense to be had about that era of the 90s, where it really was a pinnacle. It was bridging to a new millennium, and I think part of that is shown in its technology. And vaporwave really does capture that 80s, 90s aesthetic really well, but also has new end techniques from audio engineers. It's a blend of old and new. So I remember one day I was with Ben, and we were in the family computer room, and it's like an office kind of room. I remember his older sister, Bryn Rodriguez. She was in her teens, and I was amazed that she was doing this. She was typing while looking at the screen. I was just like, oh my gosh, whoa, and I remember asking her, like, how are you doing that? She's like, oh, what? I was like, how are you typing without looking at the keyboard? And I was asking her, it is like, that would be like watching a Jedi, levitate a mug for the first time, right? Like, to me, that is like seeing a Jedi use the Force. And she was like, oh, you just get used to it. I was like, get used to it? Whoa. At that time, I didn't even have an email yet. I was about to, right? My dad made my email account just a bit after that, but I wasn't playing a lot online, and when I was, it was, computer games. Shoutouts to Putt Putt, right? Freddy Fish, and so right after, though, is, I got into RuneScape. I still wasn't Spire fan at the time. Metro Prime Hunters was 2006, so I liked Banjo from Banjo-Kazooie, so I'll use the username Banjo47. I remember that's why I learned about Laugh Out Loud, and, just some general internet slang in general. I thought that the user Kim Gordon was saying lol like she's from the South. I specifically remember I said, what are you, from Texas? So Southwestern. But then someone pointed out that, LOL means laugh out loud. I remember we were in Varrock when that happened. Again, this is right after, so I'm starting to type a bit more. The thing is that I really appreciate my school system offering typing classes. In fact, it was required for at least 6th graders, right? When you're in 6th grade in my school system, you had basically a sample platter of special classes. Industrial technology, cooking, computer classes. There were 6 different ones. And then along with that was speech and drama. There was foreign language, which was, that was killer. And then obviously one of the sample platter classes was, art. And so there's a lot of different things you were doing there. And they were subdivided across 2 semesters. So, you got a bit of time for each. So I got a bit of time in computer class. And I remember computer class, Miss Coleman was an awesome teacher. The context is this is 2006. And so we get in here, we're still on, kind of CRT, like RGB cable type monitors, right? Not HDMI. But, in a nutshell, the class was, a lecture about typing, a brief lecture, your assignments. And then once you did your assignments, you were able to just freely browse the internet. And there really wasn't a strict filter back then at my middle school. And so that kind of cycle, I think added a lot of positive reinforcement for students. Computers were already seen as amazing for kids, right? It's like, whoa, look at that. Like I said, just seeing Bryn type without looking was amazing to me. And I'm thinking, oh, is this kind of what helped her with that, right? And, you learn about the home row keys and how F and J have the markers on them to keep you grounded. And at the same time, I'm in band class. One of your other elective or one of your other special classes in middle school was music related, right? And you either were in choir, orchestra, or band. And so at the time, being able to train home row keys, but also key signatures in music, you can really look back and see how much those, forging the backbones of fundamentals were right there. Stuff that helps me to this day, as an audio engineer, as someone that works on my website, as someone that types every day. These have been so essential to me, in both skills. And that kind of positive cycle of computer class where you lecture, assignment, and then free browsing the internet, that was awesome. I remember Maddie Bellman, I've known her since 6th grade, and I looked over one day during free time. She was done and she was playing Flash Revolution. I'm like, hey, that looks like DDR. She's like, oh yeah, that's Flash Revolution. And then I played that a ton afterward. So that was enjoyable. She also showed me 1980 Games, which is a website where you could play NES games via Java. So you could play Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3, Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3. That was mind blowing. So adding even more to positive reinforcement was, oh, you could, type on the computer and then go play NES games, right? Once you get your assignments done. And it's amazing how you just gradually notice that you are looking at the keyboard less, especially once I got into my freshman year of high school and I took keyboarding class again with Miss White, who was also an amazing teacher. She also did a very similar structure, lecture, here are your assignments, you finish your assignments on time, go have fun, just browse the internet and stuff. Which, you were typing in terms of like web addresses, but I remember I got into competitive Super Smash Bros. Brawl back in 2008. And in 2009, when I took this class, I think computer class played a big part in me getting into competitive Melee sooner. I think I would have got into it definitely as time went on, but because of that computer class, I was on Smash Wiki a lot when my assignments were done, reading about Mewtwo King, who at the time was one of the top Brawl players and always has been, finding out more and more about the accolades he did in Melee. I knew he played Melee at that time. But, now that I'm reading his page more and more, and I'm looking at other Smash Wiki pages, that stuff definitely added to me, getting into Melee sooner. Shout outs to Ryan Green. I remember soon after I was telling him about, hey, I'd like to try out competitive Melee. And me and him just started playing it. And I love that he still plays PM to this day. Great Bowser player. He's just a great guy in general. And I think that type of stuff, that positive reinforcement of computer class is super helpful, and I know it's still around, but I hope that in a world where we complain about our education system, we complain about things that can always be better, this is something I want to praise, because I don't think it's being as praised as much as other people are realizing. I think it's also because we live in a world where negativity is unfortunately a lot more vocal, and so in this case I want to really go out of my way to say thank you to people teaching keyboard classes, just in general. Obviously, if you're not a good teacher, hopefully you can, pick up the slack and stuff. But that's the thing. It's there's a good system to it, and it's so helpful. I think it's helpful to so many people, because you go on LinkedIn and Indeed right now, and it basically doesn't matter what occupational skill you have. You most likely need some form of like typing competency. Even if you applied from a museum artist to a cook in the kitchen, there's still some typing proficiency when it comes to like laying out your resume, which is something I picked up on in computer class. Was when I would go to like Smash Wiki, I was just kind of looking at the kind of professional presentation overall and the way that the pages are laid out. And so there's a lot to be had when learning about like modern, professionalism. And it's great that while that's happening, the teachers continue to promote more and more ideas. In the case of typing, I remember when they brought in, like when they showed like the typing covers, like you put a cover over your hands. And that was cool, because to me, when I saw the hand covers over the keyboard, I was like, oh yeah, that's the stuff Bryn does not need. She's not looking at the keyboard at all. That stuck with me since a little kid. It really is encountering like a Jedi. You're like, how do I levitate, mugs? That'd be awesome. And when I saw it is like the equivalent of like Luke with the face guard, right? I was like, oh, this is it. This is a big moment of testing the superpowers of typing competently without looking. And yeah, that class helped out a lot, 6th and 9th grade. And it just, later on, I get a degree in audio engineering and a minor in computer science, and I was typing a lot, from papers to coding. There's just so much you do, and and by the way, that's another thing about learning to type proficiently, is when you're an audio engineer, you learn shortcuts, being able to cut up audio by clicking Control E and not having to look where E is huge, right? Being able to cut an audio piece with Control X is huge. There's a lot of great things that come from being competent in a keyboard. And it's amazing that the design of the keyboard has been around for decades. It's been around for decades. I look forward to being around for, I'm advocate of not changing it just for the sake of consistency. I think it's great. in terms of like that generalized typing layout. I look forward to hopefully not just the United States, but the world, in education, promoting how important it is to have typing proficiency. And once again, it's one of those things where if people ask, like, what are the importance of this? Why would I need this? It's like, this is not only just computer class, but math, science, English, social studies. There's a lot you can grab from what you learn. We're educated on these things for a reason. And like I said, there's always the asterisk of you could have a bad teacher, you could have incompetent, like, lectures, you could have certain facts that might get updated later, though I do think Pluto's still a planet. Big fan of you. I think at the end of the day, it's important to really grasp what you're learning and then find ways that it applies in your life, rather than being negative about, say, when I've mentioned it before, when people say, why would we ever use letters in my life? Why do we bring it in math? Why do we use letters and numbers? How am I ever going to use this in life? It's like, are you going to the gas station? You don't know how much gas you need to put in your mid-filled tank, and then you go, X is probably 18. Yeah, $18. There you go. Fill up your tank. Well, nowadays it's probably like 25. But there's just so many well-rounded things in common day life that you're going to use what you learned in education. It's just being a good, well-rounded, competent person. And I'm just so glad once again that in the midst of the 2000s, in the midst of rapidly evolving technology, going from Super Smash Bros. 64, double the polygons to Melee, we still had keyboarding classes in the 2000s, and it's awesome. If you're learning to type, definitely practice and definitely test yourself. Even today, the next thing you type, try to do it without looking. Work a little bit at it, because it's one of those skills that's going to serve you for the rest of your life. I love Mondays.